For more than a decade, the world has been told a story about a shield, a miraculous, almost magical shield that plucks rockets out of the sky before they can land, that turns a barrage into a fireworks display of interceptions, that keeps a small nation safe under a dome of iron. And that story is, in the narrow sense, true. The system works. It intercepts. The engineering behind it is genuinely one of the most impressive defensive achievements of the modern era. I want you to hold that word in your mind for the next 20 minutes. Shield. Because there is a second fact, and it sits so badly next to the first one that most people simply refuse to look at both at the same time. The shield works, and the shield can be beaten, not by a better rocket, not by some new superweapon. It can be beaten by arithmetic, by a calculator, by the single most boring force in the universe, cost multiplied by quantity. The very same system that intercepts a rocket flawlessly is, at the level of economics, a machine that can be bankrupted or overwhelmed by an enemy who understands numbers better than he understands missiles. These two things, a shield that works and a shield that can be beaten by math, cannot comfortably coexist in the simple story we've been told. One of them is the marketing, the other is the vulnerability underneath. And today I'm going to show you which one actually decides the outcome of a war. Right now, if you turn on the news, everyone is asking the same question about missile defense. Did it work? What was the interception rate? 90%? 95%? They report the number like a box score. And the higher the number, the safer everyone feels. That is the wrong question. It's not that the number is fake, it's that the number all by itself hides the thing that actually matters. And you can see why "did it work" is the question everyone reaches for. It has a number attached, it fits in a headline, it lets an anxious public exhale. But notice what the interception rate quietly leaves out. It doesn't tell you what each of those interceptions cost. It doesn't tell you how many interceptors are left in the magazine afterward. It doesn't tell you how fast they can be replaced or whether the enemy was even trying his hardest. It is a snapshot of one night that tells you almost nothing about the arithmetic of the war. Ask, did it work? Get a comforting yes, and walk away from the only numbers that decide who is standing at the end. The right question, the one almost nobody is asking, is this. What did it cost to achieve that number, and what happens when the enemy makes achieving it cost more than you can afford? Because a shield that intercepts 95% of everything, but goes broke or runs empty doing it, is not a shield you can hold up forever. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you the real flaw, which is not in the physics, but in the economics, the historical disaster that this exact mistake has produced before, and at the end, the one player quietly taking notes while everyone else argues about interception rates. Let me give you the framework. I call it the saturation threshold. Here is the saturation threshold in the simplest possible way. Every defensive shield in the history of warfare, no matter how good, has two hidden limits, and neither of them is about whether it can stop a single attack. The first limit is capacity, how many things it can stop at the same time. The second limit is cost, how much it has to spend to stop each one. And the fatal fact is this: as long as the attacker's weapon is cheaper than your defense of it, and as long as the attacker can build more of them faster than you can, then there exists some number of simultaneous attacks that breaks the shield. Not because the shield fails to intercept, but because it runs out of interceptors or launchers or money or all three at once. That number, the point where the incoming volume exceeds what the shield can handle or afford in a single moment, is the saturation threshold. And the entire game, for an attacker like Iran, is not to build a better rocket. It's to find that threshold and cross it. You don't defeat the dome, you flood it. And here is the part that makes the saturation threshold so dangerous as an idea. It turns defense into a race the defender can only tie, never truly win. Think about what a shield actually promises. It promises that no matter what comes, it will stop it. But that promise is only as good as the defender's ability to keep pace with an attacker who chooses the volume, chooses the timing, and chooses the price. The defender is reactive by definition. He does not decide how many rockets are fired tonight. The attacker does. He does not decide whether it's a trickle or a flood. The attacker does. So the shield is forever answering a question the enemy gets to write. And any system whose success depends entirely on the enemy asking an easy question is a system living on borrowed restraint. The saturation threshold is simply the name for the day the enemy decides to ask a hard one. Does that make sense? Okay, let that sit, because it changes what the system worked even means. Now let me anchor this in history, because a nation once built the most advanced defensive shield of its age, and it worked perfectly, and it destroyed that nation anyway. France, in the years before the Second World War, built the Maginot Line, an extraordinary chain of fortifications along its border with Germany. Concrete, steel, underground railways, gun emplacements. By the standards of the day, it was very nearly impregnable. If the Germans had obligingly attacked it head-on, the Maginot Line would have done its job magnificently. There was one problem. The Germans simply did not attack where the shield was. They went around it, through the forest the French had assumed was impassable, and the most sophisticated defensive line in the world became a very expensive wall that the war walked right past. Here is the lesson, and it is the whole point. The Maginot Line did not fail because it was weak. It failed because the defender fell in love with the shield and stopped asking whether the enemy would attack it on the shield's terms. A flawless defense pointed at the wrong problem is not protection. It's a monument. That is the trap I want you to watch for, because I'm going to argue Israel's shield faces the same category of flaw, not weakness, but an enemy who has decided to fight the arithmetic instead of the armor. So let me give you the evidence, the specific ways the flaw is real. There are 6, and I want to be careful and honest here because this is a topic where fear and exaggeration are easy, and accuracy is hard. This is my analysis. I'll flag what's documented and what's interpretation. The system genuinely does intercept at high rates against the threats it was built for. What I'm describing is not that it fails to work, it's the conditions under which working is not enough. Watch the structure. Number 1, the cost exchange runs backwards, and over a long enough war, that is fatal. This is the single most important idea in the entire video, so slow down with me. A short-range rocket of the kind these systems were built to stop can cost a few hundred to a few $1,000s, crude, cheap, mass-producible. The interceptor that knocks it down is a precise, guided piece of technology that, by widely reported estimates, costs on the order of tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes far more, per shot. Now hold that ratio in your hand. The attacker spends 1 and forces the defender to spend 50 or 100. Every single exchange, the defender wins the battle and loses the arithmetic. Picture 2 men, 1 rich and 1 poor. Every time the poor man throws a cheap rock, the rich man must respond by throwing a gold coin to knock it out of the air. The rich man never gets hit. He also goes broke. The Iron Dome, at the level of economics, is a machine for turning cheap enemy rockets into expensive friendly spending. It works. And every time it works, it costs the defender far more than it costs the attacker to make it work. That is a flaw you cannot engineer away, because it lives in the price tag, not the hardware. And this is the single most important thing to understand about modern defense. So let me inflate the stakes and say it plainly. In a long war, the side that runs out of money loses just as surely as the side that runs out of soldiers. We are trained to think of defense as invulnerability. The shield either holds or it doesn't. But a shield that holds by bleeding the treasury is not invulnerable. It is on a countdown, and the enemy controls the speed of the clock by choosing how many cheap rocks to throw. The poor man in that image has understood something the rich man refuses to. He doesn't have to win a single exchange to win the war. He only has to keep throwing rocks until the gold runs out. That is not a battlefield problem, it's a solvency problem wearing a battlefield's clothes. Number 2. There is a ceiling on how many things you can shoot at once. This is the capacity half of the threshold. Every battery has a finite number of interceptors loaded and ready. Every radar can track only so many targets in the same instant. Every crew can manage only so many engagements. So there is, by physics and by inventory, a maximum number of incoming objects the shield can handle in a single moment. Here's the analogy. Imagine a goalkeeper, the best goalkeeper who has ever lived. Against 1 ball, he saves it every time. Against 2, he's brilliant. But now imagine someone kicks 50 balls at the goal in the same 3 seconds. It does not matter how good the goalkeeper is. He has 2 hands and 1 body, and some of those balls are going in, not because he's bad, but because no keeper can be in 50 places at once. Saturation is 50 balls in 3 seconds. The attacker's job is not to kick a better ball, it's to kick enough of them at the same instant that the keeper's skill stops mattering. Number 3, and this is where it gets clever, you don't need every rocket to get through. You only need to force the defender into an impossible choice. Sophisticated defenses are often designed to save money by only intercepting threats that are actually going to hit something important, letting the ones headed for empty fields fall harmlessly. That's smart engineering. But it also means the defender is constantly making split-second decisions about which incoming objects are worth an expensive interceptor. Now imagine the attacker mixes cheap decoys in with real warheads, or fires a huge volume where the system must decide, in seconds, which few of 100 objects truly threaten a city. Every wrong guess in the defender's favor wastes a gold coin interceptor on a rock. Every wrong guess in the attacker's favor lets a real one through. It's like a pickpocket working a crowd by having 10 accomplices bump into you at once. You can't check all 10 pockets. And while you're patting down the decoys, the real thief is already gone. The flaw isn't that the shield can't intercept, it's that the enemy can force it to spend its expensive shots on the wrong targets. Let me micro-reset here because this is the hinge of the whole argument. Nobody serious is claiming the interceptor misses. The claim is that you can win every interception and still lose, because the enemy isn't trying to beat the missile, he's trying to beat the budget and the inventory, okay? Hold that. The war is against the calculator, not the rocket. Number 4, layers can be attacked in the wrong dimension. A real air defense network isn't one shield, it's several, stacked. One layer for cheap short-range rockets, another for larger, longer-range, faster ballistic threats, another for cruise missiles and drones flying low and slow. Each layer is optimized, and each layer's interceptors are priced accordingly. The ones built to catch big ballistic missiles are dramatically more expensive than the ones built to catch small rockets. So here is the sophisticated attack. You don't send one type of threat, you send all of them at once. A swarm of cheap drones, a wave of short-range rockets, and a handful of expensive ballistic missiles, all arriving in overlapping windows. Now the defender's system has to sort a chaotic, mixed altitude, mixed speed picture in real time and commit the right interceptor to the right threat, instantly. It's like a boxer being attacked simultaneously by a jab, a body hook, and a leg kick. Each requires a completely different defense, and defending against one leaves you open to the others. Mixing the vectors is how you turn a layered shield's greatest strength, specialization, into a coordination problem it can be forced to fail. Number 5, inventory is a slow clock and the enemy sets the pace. Interceptors are complex to manufacture. You cannot conjure them overnight. There are supply chains, components, production rates. The cheap rocket, by contrast, can be churned out in far greater numbers, far faster. So over a sustained conflict, the attacker can regenerate his threat faster than the defender can restock his shield. Every large barrage draws down a magazine that takes time and money and industrial capacity to refill. Think of it as bailing water out of a boat with a bucket while the other side drills holes with a power tool. You can bail beautifully. You can be the best bailer alive. But if the holes appear faster than you can empty the bucket, the boat still sinks. Slowly, inevitably, and no amount of bailing skill changes the arithmetic of the inflow. The defender's problem in a long war is not any single barrage. It's the resupply race behind the barrages. Number 6, and this one is psychological, which is why it never shows up in the interception rate. The attacker doesn't even need to succeed to win. Remember, the shield exists to protect a population's sense of safety as much as its physical bodies. But every barrage, even one intercepted at 95%, sends millions of people to shelters, halts an economy, disrupts sleep, drains reserves, and reminds an entire society that the fireworks overhead are a war. The attacker spends cheaply to impose that cost again and again, and the shield, even working perfectly, cannot intercept the fear, the disruption, or the exhaustion. A shield can stop a rocket. It cannot stop the meaning of the rocket. And an enemy content to keep firing cheaply, indefinitely, is buying that meaning at a discount every single night. Now I promised you intellectual honesty, and here it is, because there is a genuinely strong argument against everything I've just said, and I won't dodge it. The strongest case against me is this. Interception rates are, in fact, extraordinarily high, and the systems have been upgraded, layered, and expanded specifically to address saturation. Israel doesn't just have one shield, it has a whole architecture of them, backed by allied resupply, shared early warning, and constant improvement. And in real documented conflicts, the overwhelming majority of incoming threats have been stopped. Cities have been protected, and casualties have been kept remarkably low given the volume of fire. So the fatal flaw framing, a skeptic would say, is theoretical doom-mongering. In practice, the shield has held. The saturation attack keeps getting predicted and the dome keeps performing. Betting against it has been a losing bet. I want to be completely fair to that. It is the strongest objection and it is grounded in real performance. If you hold it, say so in the comments. A great many serious defense analysts do, and they have the track record on their side. But here is what that argument cannot explain. High interception rates and the existence of the flaw are not opposites. They are the same fact seen from two directions. The shield holds precisely by paying the unfavorable cost exchange and drawing down a finite magazine backed by outside resupply. That is not a refutation of the saturation threshold. It's a description of the threshold not yet being crossed. It has always held so far is exactly what every defender of every impregnable line has said, right up until the day the enemy stopped attacking it on its own terms. The Maginot Line held perfectly too, against the attack that never came. The relevant question is not whether the shield has worked against the barrages Iran has chosen to send. It's what happens on the day Iran sends the barrage it has been carefully declining to send, the mass, mixed-vector, decoy-laced flood designed specifically to find the threshold, while the resupply pipeline is stretched and the magazine is low. The skeptic's confidence is built on the enemy's restraint, and you do not get to count your enemy's restraint as your own strength. So let me bring it all together. Israel's shield is not weak. That's the whole trap of this subject. People who point at the flaw are accused of saying the shield fails, and people who defend the shield point at its real high success rate. Both miss the actual structure. The shield works, and the flaw is real at the same time, because the flaw was never about physics. It's about economics and inventory and the enemy's freedom to choose when to flood. A shield that wins every interception while paying 50-1, drawing down a slow-to-refill magazine, and depending on an enemy not to send his worst barrage, is a shield that is strong today and structurally exposed tomorrow. The fatal flaw isn't that the dome can't stop a rocket. It's that the dome can be made too expensive, too depleted, and too overwhelmed to keep stopping all of them, and the enemy holds the calendar. And notice how this rhymes with the other great vulnerability of the region, the choke point, the narrow water where a fifth of the world's oil is held hostage not by force, but by the permanent possibility of force. It's the same shape of problem. In both cases, a stronger, richer party is made to spend enormously, indefinitely, to hold off a threat that costs the weaker party almost nothing to keep making. The dome and the strait are two faces of one strategy. Don't try to be stronger than your enemy. Just make being safe from you cost him more than he can bear forever. That is the logic Iran has quietly built its entire posture around, and the interception rate on any given night tells you nothing about whether that logic is winning. Now, the part almost nobody is talking about. While the whole world argues about interception rates, who is quietly learning the most from this? Follow the eyes at the edge of the room, the patient giant, China. Because here is what a prolonged demonstration of missile defense versus saturation really is. It's the most detailed, real-world stress test of Western air defense ever conducted, performed for free, in public, for anyone patient enough to study it. Every barrage, every interception, every cost exchange, every moment the magazine runs low is data. Data about exactly how much volume it takes to strain a modern Western shield, exactly which mix of threats causes the most trouble, exactly how fast the interceptors deplete, and how fast they can be replaced. And that data matters to a great power thinking about a very different theater, one where its own vast arsenal of cheap, numerous missiles might someday face American and Allied shields. The patient giant doesn't have to fire a shot. It just has to watch two other parties conduct the experiment and take notes on the cost curve, the saturation point, and the resupply race. Think about how rare and how valuable this is. Militaries spend fortunes trying to simulate exactly this, how a modern shield behaves under sustained, real fire, with real budgets, real inventories, and real political pressure. You cannot buy that data. You cannot fully model it. You can only get it from an actual war. And here is an actual war, running the experiment in the open, with all the variables that matter: cost exchange, magazine depth, resupply speed, the effect of mixed vector barrages, the political tolerance for even a small number of leakers getting through. For a great power planning around its own enormous missile stockpiles, this conflict is a laboratory it didn't have to pay for and doesn't have to bleed in. Every drawn-down magazine is a lesson. Every resupply request is a data point about how thin the pipeline really is. The most valuable seat in this entire conflict isn't behind the shield or behind the rockets. It's in the back row with a notebook, learning precisely how much it costs to keep a dome standing and precisely how many missiles it takes to make one buckle. That is the twist. Iran tests the shield, Israel pays to hold it, and the patient giant reads the results of an experiment it never had to run. So here are three things to watch: falsifiable, specific, in the next 48 to 72 hours. Test me. 1. Watch for reporting on interceptor stockpiles and resupply, not interception rates. If you see stories about emergency replenishment, allied transfers of interceptors, or concerns about magazine depth, that is the arithmetic surfacing. The flaw becoming visible through the supply line rather than the sky. A single line about resupply tells you more about the true state of the shield than a week of interception rate headlines ever will. 2. Watch for mixed vector, high-volume barrages rather than steady trickles. If an attack combines drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles in overlapping windows, note that this is the shape of a saturation probe, an attempt to find the threshold, not just to cause damage. The tell is coordination in time, not more rockets, but many different kinds arriving in the same few minutes, each forcing a different and differently priced response. 3. Watch the patient giant say almost nothing while its analysts say a great deal. Watch for a conspicuous lack of Chinese comment paired with clear signs of close technical study. Silence at the front, notebooks in the back. The louder the world argues about interception percentages, the more freely the real students of this war can take their notes. Here is your homework, and actually do it. Pull up 2 things and read them side by side. First, the story of the Maginot Line, the flawless shield that the war simply walked around. Second, any honest technical discussion of the cost per interceptor versus cost per rocket in modern air defense. Put them next to each other and ask yourself one question. Is Israel's shield a wall the enemy attacks, or a wall the enemy has learned to make too expensive to keep building? And if you think I've overstated the flaw, if you believe the arithmetic genuinely doesn't matter because the architecture and resupply have permanently solved saturation, then tell me exactly why in the comments. Show me where the cost exchange stops being fatal. I genuinely want to be proven wrong, because this is my analysis and it is not gospel. I'll leave you with one question to sit with after this ends. If a shield can win every single interception and still be defeated by a calculator, if working perfectly and being beatable are somehow the same fact, then what were we actually measuring all those years when we cheered the interception rate? And who was really being protected? The city under the dome, or the story we tell ourselves about the dome? I'll see you in the next one.